Now while that's drying, we'll get started on putting the box together. And it's always good to just kind of make sure all the glue is off of the where the plywood meets the redwood, and I kind of go around and make sure all the splinters are off of it, any place we've drilled a hole and what have you. See, that's not a big, complicated proposition. It's just sort of give it a real quick once over with a coarse sandpaper and a sanding block. Now we're going to check the dry fit on it. That is, let's make sure that this part will in fact fit down in there. If it doesn't, you might need to do just a little bit more sanding on it. I like them to be tight. And what I'm going to do is put it right where it's going to go, situate it just the way it's going to go. Looks to me like it will go together okay. And then I stick a little mark on that bottom piece, and that's going to show us where we need to put the glue. We're going to put the glue from the mark all the way to the edge. But I notice that there's some hardened glue that's right in that corner. We want to make sure we get that out because that'll prevent the two pieces from coming together. Once I'm happy with that though, we're ready to zip through this glue application process. You've seen it before, so I'm not going to take much time to do this. But I do want to point out that this is the most important joint on the box, so we've got to make sure everything fits together just the way we want it. And sometimes it's a little bit of a trick because those two dimensions are both 14 and 5/8. That is the distance between the two runners on the bottom, and the width of the end are both 14 and 5/8. So I use my little mallet here to tap it in place. Once I do that, then let's snap it down. And just to make absolutely sure that those two pieces are together the way they should be, I'm even going to just take my handy dandy little clamps here and cinch them up just to make sure that completely seated into the bottom. The end is completely seated into the bottom. And of course, once I'm happy with that, then we can take the clamps off and throw some brad nails in it. I probably use 8 or 10 brad nails on that. And then we'll pull it up, take a look at it, make sure that there's no gap between the two pieces. Looks good to me. Got a bunch of glue oozing out, which is probably a good sign. That means they went together really well. Repeat the process on the other side. The other thing I like to do is just knock these corners off just a little bit. That makes it a little bit easier for the top to slide on. Let's check for that hardened glue where the runner meets the top. And if we've got any, which I do here, then I'll just use the chisel to get rid of it. Now we want to mark right where we're going to need to put the glue. And again, let's just throw a bunch of glue on both pieces. And I think that joint is real important as well. You want to make sure you get glue down into the corners there real well. And again, if you take your little applicator and butter that glue out, that joint will be as strong as it can be, which of course is what we want to do. Now what should happen here is this is just going to slide right down into place nice and easy for us. It's going to be tight because that's the way we like it. There we go. Looks like it's starting to go pretty good. And the other side should go in as well. Now, sometimes you have to use a little bit of persuasion here to make things happen just the way you want them to. Now, I find that it's good to use a block of wood if you have to snap it down in place, which we do here. And again, if I wanted to, I could clamp that if I wasn't happy that it went down right. Looks to me like it did go down well, because I have glue oozing out where the two pieces squeeze together. And let's stick some brad nails in it. Those are the 5/8" brad nails that I use as a general rule. Then let's whip it around, do the same thing on the other side. I'll speed it up a bit. And what we have is basically a box that's been put together. This one's going down a little harder, so I'm going to have to use my clamps here and maybe just squeeze everything together as hard as I can. Once I have it the way I like it, then we'll brad nail it again. It should fit pretty tight. So that pretty much concludes the basic box assembly. Probably do want to make sure we put a little effort into getting all the glue off in various places. Flip the box over, make sure you got the glue there as well. Got the glue off there as well. And then again, let's check to make sure it's square, which of course I like to use my little 8/8 blocks to do that with on a nice flat surface. Now while we're there, we can go ahead and mount the end plates as well. And you see the procedure here really just involves sticking a little glue on the end plate itself. And since it's on that nice flat surface there, we can just slide it right up into place and make sure it's down flat against the flat surface. And zap it with several nails. You kit builders out there have screws for this. You can do it either way, of course. You don't have to do it with brad nails, but I find it very easy to do. Of course, you want to do the other side as well. Now, while that's drying, we'll come over here and round these corners on the doors. And the easy way to do it is you start by just cutting a 45-degree angle right at the very end. I'm taking off about 1/8 of an inch. There's about 1/8 of an inch between the blade and the fence, so actually you're taking off more like 1/4 of an inch because of the thickness of the blade. But all you have to do is just run around and nip off each of the ends. And once we have the ends 45, once we have a 45-degree angle on the ends, then it's a simple matter to just take our little sanding block and round them off. And that, I think it makes it a little bit nicer. The other thing you notice, I'm just also hitting the edge to make sure we don't have any splinters, which of course is always a big issue when you're dealing with wood. And of course those splinters tend to collect on the edges, so we're going to hit the edges very hard. And any place out there in the middle that might have a little piece of glue on it or something like that, you want to do as well. Now it's time to, tell you the truth, I don't put the center partition in until after I've finished boxes, because I don't like to have to try to get my hand in tight spaces. So what I'll tend to do is finish the box and the divider separately, and then install the divider after I'm done finishing the box. But you do want to do a little sanding on it. All those holes there, you probably just want to very quickly run over it with a coarse sandpaper to make sure, again, we get all the splinters off of it and everything's just nice and smooth. And we do want to check the dry fit on this part, because it can be a little tight on occasion. Now you notice that X up there? That X is actually kind of important, because when I drilled those holes, I drilled them together with that end, which also has an X on it. I put the X on there so that I'd know which piece matches up with the divider. Now let's throw a drawer shelf in there, and then we're going to just, we want to make sure all the glue's off of where the joints are, where the redwood and the plywood joint is, both on the top and on the bottom. And then we're going to just sort of slide this divider in place. You might have to do a little bit of sanding on it to make it work. Now, I don't actually glue the divider because there isn't really any force on it to speak of. So what I'm going to do is just nail it in with brad nails. And just to make sure I have it in the right spot, I'm going to stick a couple of those little 1/4-inch dowel rods in there. Those dowel pins is actually what those are. And we'll throw the other drawer shelf up there, and then I can just kind of make sure that the divider's right up against both those shelves. That is, there is no gap between them. Now, I don't use glue when I put these things in. At some moment in time you may want to redo some things, maybe make some wider drawers or something of that nature, and you might want to be able to take that out. So I just use 5/8-inch brad nails to do this. And now that we have everything in place, all you really have to do is just, stick your brad nailer underneath where you want to nail, line it up, zap that baby. Now, of course, you're going to do that on both sides, and then once you have that done, then you should have 2 brad nails. You take a straight edge. I'll just use this shelf and line up those 2 brad nails with the straight edge, and that will show you where you need to put a few more brad nails in order to get that partition to hold. And we're going to do that on both top and bottom, of course. So in order to position, I flip the box over, and in order to position it, we do exactly the same thing. Stick that shelf in there, which, by the way, is 1/16 wider than a drawer. So this ensures that the drawer will slide nice and easy. We can butt it right up against the shelf, and it'll still come out, but the drawer will slide nice and easy because it's a 1/16 of an inch smaller. Same process. Zap it with your brad nailer on both sides. Flip it over and line up those 2 brads that you just put in, and that gives you a reference so you can put in a few more, and that should hold just fine. The compartment shelves will hold that center partition in just fine. Now it's a matter of sticking dowel pins where you want them. I like to put them, for this large compartment here, out there in the middle. There's one little trick here that we're going to have to pay attention to. Now let me check. As you'll remember, I cut this shelf, and I just didn't want to put it, I don't want to assemble this shelf until I checked it. As it turns out, it's right. But you might find yours isn't, because you have this thickness plus this thickness plus this thickness, and it all gets made up for in this one compartment, because the thickness of the drawer shelves is fixed. So this guy here, we might actually have to trim a little bit off if your plywood happens to be a little bit thicker than that. And that's why I didn't actually assemble it. Those 3 thicknesses create variability in the width of that shelf. But once you have it put together, then you can measure it, make that shelf exactly the size you want it so that it fits nice and snug. And I like to put my wash tubs on that particular shelf. And we'll throw some drawers over here on the other side. I'm going to show you how to do drawers in a separate video. They're kind of a trick to make, but they give you a lot of functionality, so something we're going to want to do. Let's set it up, make sure everything goes together good. Our drawers slide good, our doors slide good. Stand goes on top. We're ready for stain.